Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to say I'm very happy, honored to be able to speak here for Black History Month. And before I'd like to speak, who's the elder in the area? I don't want to call people out, but whoever is the elder, I would like them to give me permission to speak as an African tradition. So, okay, good, thanks. This month we're honoring Black History Month. This Black History Month has started from Black History Week, actually, from Carter G. Woodson. But I entitled this Black History, the real Black History Month, because I wanted to speak about history beyond the typical Black history. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that when we have Black History Month, we are familiar with Martin Luther King, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, these people of that nature, which all praise and honors to them as well. However, Black people, or so-called blacks, have been around much longer than 1619. And so a lot of times we don't get that history. So what we have for Black history is the study of Black history is vast and it's a long journey that extends beyond 1619. It is not just for the month of February, as many may think. Black history is not for North Americans only. It is a diaspora of history. Black history is not about slaves, as many have, looked at in the past. When we look at Black history, like we said, we look at 1619 on up to now, and that is basically within the slave period. So we want to look at what happened before 1619. Like I said, Black History Month was created by Carter G. Woodson for Black History Week, and we have to give honors to Carter G. Woodson for at least acknowledging there was a Black history at a time when blacks were not excluded; they were excluded from history. Okay, you go to the next one. The term black has been used to describe people of African descent. Now, I use that term here to relate. However, the term black really does not do justice to us as a people. Black is a color. It is not a ethnic or ethnicity. It is a color in a box, the crayons. You have black, you have white, you have yellow. So these things are not necessarily giving you a true representation of the people of African descent. Black deals with the array of African and indigenous people in the diaspora. Now, I say indigenous people because we look over in the Americas and we found that there are also people of melanated or dark or what we call black that were here as well in the Americas. So the Black history has to be looked at outside of even Africa itself. So when I'm referring to the word black today, we're going to be looking at blacks as Kemet, which I'll explain, Nubia, Kush, Canaan, Libya, Mauritania, West Africa, or West Coast Africa, the Americas, Australia, China, all those places, Europe. So black is everywhere. Early African history. I got the pyramids here. We're going to start with the early African history. And when we look at African history, we always seem to start with Kemet. Now, the word Kemet, which I'll get into, but that is the word that the Africans use to describe themselves. And I go to Kemet because that is the apex of what we call black civilization. That is the apex. It would be like the equivalent of Rome to Europeans. Okay, we got the timeline. Basically, this is the Egyptian history timeline. I wanted to show that the extent of our history goes back, it's kind of blurry, but it goes back at least 5,000, if not more, 5,000 BC. So we're talking 6,000 years ago that we are looking at ancient Kemet. So it shows you that you have the pre-dynastic area or era. It goes all the way, and then when you look toward the end, you can see like the last 3 steps has Persian, Greek, and Roman. So when you look at that, you can see that Kemet extended way before Persia, Greek, or Roman. Okay. These civilizations of Greek and Roman come much, much later in history. And so a lot of times when we look at Kemet or Egypt today, we tend to see a reflection of the European or Greco-Roman phenotypes even on the statues or things like that. But that's much later in their history. Kemet extends way further back than just Greek and Roman. So I just wanted to show you a timeline of kind of what was going on. You got Cheops, you got Menhotep, Akhenaten, Ramses. These are great pharaohs of ancient Kemet that were hundreds and thousands of years just before you got Ptolemy or Cleopatra, which are things that you hear about when you talk about Julius Caesar and the Greeks and Romans. So just wanted to show that. Next one. We can go to the next slide. Okay. Kemet. Ancient Kemet. I got the word Egypt to show you that is the Greek term for Kemet. Kemet is one of the terms that were used, like I said, to describe themselves, but it means black land. When we're looking at dating back to 5,000 BC, we're looking at Kemet being the black land, the fertile land. When we're looking at the fertile land, we're talking about the Nile River, and the Nile River was the life of ancient Kemet, and so they wanted to reflect who they were by looking at the soil in the land. So when we're talking about black land, we're not necessarily talking about the people. We're talking about the soil. Talking about the fertile land of Kemet in a sense. I can't see back there. I don't have that page. They were the first to create writing, math, law, and science. Now, when we're talking about writing, we're looking at the hieroglyphics. Everybody's familiar with hieroglyphs. What the true word for that is the Medu Neter. The Medu Neter is meaning the words of God. And that was written on the pyramids. So we have, and they have those things called pyramid text. So these were like the first writings of literature in civilization. We talk about law, science. The Kemetic people, to build that pyramid that we saw on it, there had to be a particular mathematics equations that had to be dealt with to be able to build that type of architecture. That architecture has not even been matched to this day. Okay, I mean, you can't even get a piece of paper between the stones to this day. It has withstand earthquakes. I mean, it's been here at least 3,000 years. And I don't know really too many structures that are still intact to this day. I mean, you can go to the Colosseums in Rome. They're not there. Like, you know, they're there, but they're not intact. You have, you know, Greek temples. None of these things are intact like your pyramids. So there was a particular mathematic perfection that they had. I mean, we look at Pythagoras' theorems, and that's about the triangle. When we look at that, Pythagoras went to Kemet to study. So we see the pyramids being there already, and he coming up with the theorems of the triangle. So we see that a lot of the math and science that has come even today comes out of ancient Kemet. Like I said, we're first to create complex architectural buildings. They were the first ones that you'll find religious temples, not just the pyramids, but actual religious temples with, I mean, humongous, large structures, and the statues, large statues that they built, these megalith things that they built. So Kemet, we have to look at Kemet, which is in Africa. And at first, that's what I want to also say. We look at Kemet, many people have taken Egypt or Kemet out of Africa. They have made it the Middle East. They have this thing called the Suez Canal that they almost seem like they try to cut off Egypt from Africa. And they try to make it from sub-Saharan Egypt, or sub-Saharan Africa. You have sub-Saharan Africa, which is what they call the Africans, and then North Africa is looked at as Arabic or other than African. But Kemet is definitely in Africa. Okay, I mean, there's no mistake about it. Okay, we can go to the next one. The Great Kemetic People. Kemet is an African civilization, as I spoke, based on Diop's review. Now, Sheikhat Diop was a great researcher and historian that was able, he actually was an African who created the carbon dating. So he was able to come up with the scientific remedy to figure out how things were aged through carbon dating process. Okay, but he used that to actually show how old the Kemetic people were. He also was able to show the color of the ancient Kemetic people. So based on Diop's review on scientific literature, Diop concluded that most of the skeletons and skulls of the ancient Egyptians clearly indicate they were Negroid people with features very similar to those of the black Nubians, which we're going to get into Nubia. The Nubian people, the Nubians and other people of the Upper Nile and East Africa. He called attention to studies that included examinations of skulls from the pre-dynastic period, which is 6000 BC, that showed a greater percentage of black characteristics than any other phenotype. Diop invented the method of determining a level of melanin in the skin of human beings. Melanin is the chemical that is responsible for the skin pigmentation. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into melanin because melanin is a whole subject on its own, but melanin is what gives people color, but it also is found in all people in various levels. It's what makes your hair color, these type of things, but melanin is definitely is what makes your skin that color. It says melanin, and it's preserved, this melanin pigmentation has been preserved for millions of years in the skin of the fossil animals. So I got the picture of the Black Pharaoh. I want you to see that because that was a picture on National Geographic. So it's not just me speaking from an Afrocentric perspective that the Kemetic people were of us. They were us. Okay. Okay, you can go to the next one. To continue on with the Kemetic people, to give more evidence on the pigmentation of blacks in Africa, in Egypt, that Herodotus said that the Egyptians had black skin and woolly hair. Now, Herodotus was the Greek historian. For those who are not aware, he was one of the great historians of the Greek time. And he says that they had woolly hair, which is how he said that the Egyptians looked also. So he's comparing the Ethiopians along with the Egyptians. So to the eyes of Herodotus, they were very similar in appearance. Aristotle, which is a Greek philosopher, he also called both the Ethiopian and Egyptians black. Now understand that the term, when they used the word black then, I don't even know if they used the term black back then. I mean, when I look back at that time, you'll find that they'll call them dark skin. I watch a show called Spartacus. I don't know if anybody's seen that show before, but when you watch that show, it gives you a historical depiction of how they talk. And one of the characters was engaged with a woman of African descent. And so when he described her, he would say that this woman is my dark-skinned woman. So he didn't call them, they didn't say black. And that's what, that's the point I'm trying to make. When we say black, black is the color of this, or the color, I'm not black in color, I'm brown in color. So we tend to get the word mixed up in today's Americanized terminology. So Aristotle was probably saying that the Egyptians and the Ethiopians were dark-skinned people. And it also talks about the Bible, both being Ethiopian and Egyptians for the son of Ham, which I'm not going to get into that, but the son of Ham in the Bible is referring to, the word Ham means burnt or dark. And see, that's another thing. They said burnt or dark. They didn't use the term black. So you also have that. The Egyptians also saw themselves as belonging to their own race. Different from the blacks to the south, which we're talking about Nubia, but also different from all other neighbors on the other hand. So looking at that picture, those are pictures of Egyptian women in, I think it's the second dynastic period. So as you can see, they depict themselves as dark-skinned people. Okay, go to the next one. All right. Now this brother right here, Imhotep. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Imhotep. You might have heard of him in The Mummy. Anybody seen the movie The Mummy? They gave him a very bad depiction of, by the way, I might add. I mean, they got him out there evil and, sorcery and all these things, but that's Hollywood for you. So I'm not going to get into that. But Imhotep is the first master mason, okay? Now, when I mean masons, we're talking about masons. If you look at today, we've got masons. Some of them, you might see them wearing this fez, or the Shriners. But masons are typically known as builders. Okay, I mean, you have brick masons, but then it has also become a philosophical event as well. When you look at Freemasons, which they build off of actual building masons. Well, I say he's the first master mason because Imhotep was one of the first to build the pyramids. He was the first one to build a pyramid. Imhotep, sometimes called Imhotep or Amhotep, also called Ismuthis, comes around the 27th century BC. So he was around 2650 to 2600 BC. Now we're talking about, when they say BC, they're saying before Christ, or they're saying before Common Era. So we're talking 4,000 years ago. Okay, 4,000 years ago, this African Egyptian, which his name means one who comes in peace. Okay. Or one with peace. He was an Egyptian polymath who served under the third dynastic king, Zoser. Zoser is the one who built the Step Pyramid. Or it was actually Imhotep was the one who built the Step Pyramid, but it was under Zoser's reign. He was a chancellor to the pharaoh, and he was a high priest of the sun god Ra. No individual of the ancient world has left a deeper impression on history than Imhotep. He was the first real father of medicine. Now, that's important because when we speak about medicine, many of us talk about Hippocrates being the father of medicine. Now, I can't substantiate, but there's a quote that says that Hippocrates was saying that I am a child of Imhotep. Okay, so we're seeing the magnitude of who Imhotep was. So he was the real father of medicine. He is, says Sir William Osser, the first figure of a physician to stand out clearly from the mist of antiquity. Now you have to understand that in Kemetic times, they were able to do complex medicine, complex operations. They were able to take and meld bone if there was an accident. There was a lot of pyramid building, and so there was a lot of accidents, and they were able to amputate arms, legs without death. Now that was not able to be done successfully until really in the past 100 years. In the past 100 years, you've seen great strides in medical, in the medical profession. But before that, in our present paradigm, they weren't able to do these things. So Imhotep, being the father, that he was really the pioneer of a lot of the techniques that have been picked up later on now today. Let's see where I was at. The figure first of the details of his life, very little has survived through numerous statues and statuettes of him have been found. He lived at the court of King Zoser in the 3rd dynasty around 2980 BC. He established such a reputation as a healer that he was worshipped as a god for the next 3,000 years. Now, I don't know too many people that, outside of some of the religious people like Jesus or Moses or Muhammad, but I don't know too many people, especially in antiquity, that was able to be worshipped as a god. I mean, that means he had to be a real high caliber kind of guy. But not even just worship as a god in Egypt, but in Greece and Rome. Now I do know that there was many people from Greece, from Greek or Roman times, that actually traveled to Kemet just to go to his tomb. People have been known to have been healed just by going to his tomb. So there was massive pilgrimages to Kemet to see Imhotep, or just to go to his grave. Okay. And like I said, he was worshipped as the Prince of Peace. Now, I've heard the term Prince of Peace used before, and that was on Melchizedek in the Bible. So I mean, he's up in that caliber of kind of people. So he's very important to us. We have Queen Tiye. Now, I want you to look at this sister. She looks like Angela Davis, doesn't she? I mean, she's got the afro. All she needs is a pig with a fist on it, and she's good to go. But I want to show that because you're looking at Queen Tiye, which was she was the daughter of Ua, and I can never say this, Chujuro, okay, spelled Thuro. She became a great royal wife of the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III, but she was the mother of Akhenaten and the grandmother of Tutankhamun. Now, everybody know who King Tut is, correct? Okay, so she's the great-grandmother of King Tut. So we know, so if you're looking at her, you know that King Tut couldn't have been too far behind in how he looked. Okay, but she's important just for the fact that she was the mother of Akhenaten. Now, Akhenaten was a pharaoh who is known to bring one worship of God to Kemet, which many people, say is polytheistic and many gods, but Akhenaten made the one God first. And so he was important. So her place is in history important because of what she brought with Akhenaten. And also with King Tut, because King Tut is really the only way a lot of us know what happened in Kemet, because a lot of the tomb robbers and raiders took a lot of the things, and so King Tut was one of the more intact structures that was left when what's his name, Carter? I can't remember the archaeologist's name fully, but his name was Carter. He found King Tut's tomb, and that brought out a lot of more information about what Egypt was. So she has her importance. Her mummy is identified as the elder lady found in the tomb of Amenhotep. Okay, so she's very important. Now, we go to the next one. Nubian Pharaohs. Now, I had more on this. I did another PowerPoint, but it wasn't able to load on here. But I want to speak about Nubia. Nubia is right south. It's right under Kemet. Now, Kemet is in the north corner of Africa, in the northeastern corner of Africa. Right under it, where the Sudan is today, where we call it Sudan, or the Sudan, that is where Nubia laid. Now, Nubia is important because even the Kemetic people saw them as black, I mean, brothers. Like, you know, it's kind of like the Kemetic people had become so civilized and kind of had started mixing a little bit. But down a little bit south, their brothers and sisters down south, they were that true down home African people. Okay, you'll find that you'll find a lot of pyramids in Nubia. Many people don't, like most people when they go to Egypt, they go to see the pyramids in Egypt. Nobody goes to see the pyramids in Nubia. There's pyramids in Nubia. There's hundreds of pyramids in Nubia, but nobody speaks to them. Okay, because they're dark. I mean, maybe it's because they are the darker people. But I got the Nubian pharaohs because at one point in time, Nubia had invaded, or I don't say invaded, but they had to take control of Kemet because there was things that was happening in Kemet that the infrastructure was being jeopardized. And so you have some Nubian pharaohs who come in, or Nubian people come in and become pharaohs to keep Kemet in order. So they're important. As you can see, he has the snakes on his crown. That is a symbol of a Kemetic reign. Okay. Go to the next one. I think these are kind of out of order too, but I have a picture of I think it's a picture of a map on the next one. All right. So you can see now in the top, like I said, in the top right, in the top right is where you'll find Kemet, in that corner area. Yeah, she's kind of going up in there, but right, okay, where she got the arrow, it's kind of, that's where the Saudi Arabia and all that. But right by where it says Africa or whatnot, that right there is that is where Egypt existed, right there in that corner. Okay, so I just want to show you a picture. This is an ancient map of of Africa, and it's important for us to realize that this whole North Africa right here was very prominent in the in bringing civilization to Europe and the rest of the world. So I just wanted to show that. So we go to the next one. Okay, now the misinformation of the media. I just want to show this. Like we have, when we look at Cleopatra, this is what we see. This is what we normally would see. A lot of times Kemet has been whitewashed or been portrayed as something else that is really not. And so what we're seeing here is a psychological usage of certain genders and ethnic people to give credence or to misrepresent something. Okay, so I think sometimes this is why we don't connect our African past with Black History Month today. It's because we don't see Africa as us. We don't see ancient Africans as us. So I just wanted to put that in there and to show how you can see how these things happen. All right, we got sister. What's that? Where's that at? Queen Sheba. Queen Sheba is very known to most of us through the Bible as being with Solomon. But Queen Sheba, do I have this page? Queen Sheba, what did it say? Queen Sheba in Hebrew, we're not going to really read Hebrew, but she was a monarch or the queen of the ancient kingdoms of Sheba, and they're referring to the Yemen, and in Ethiopia, it can be also Ethiopia. The thing about it is, historians are not quite sure exactly where her kingdom was. They say some of it might have been in the Yemen, which is like kind of in Saudi Arabia. Some say it was in Ethiopia, like there's Ethiopian books called the Kemet Nagast, who talks about her being in Ethiopia. But nonetheless, she's a very important person. She is widely assumed to have been the queen, but since there is no historical proof of this, she has been known as the queen consort. The location of her kingdom is uncertain. Like I said, one believes that it was in Ethiopia, while some believe it was in Yemen. Modern scholarship suggests that it was in South Arabia in the kingdom of Saba. But I wanted to show her because many don't understand that she is, I mean, if you look at the picture, she is depicted as an African woman. So Queen Sheba is part of our African history as well. Go to the next one. Which is yes, Mansa Musa. Now Mansa Musa, he was a very powerful king during the time of, really at a time when Europe was in a dark age. We've jumped now. King Musa was around 1280 to 1337 AD. So we're talking more like, what's this? Maybe 500 years ago. We're talking more like 500 years ago. Now, I got him as the richest man in history. Mansa was the 10th Mansa, meaning king of kings. He was the 10th king of kings of the emperor, of the Malian Empire. At the time Mansa Musa rise to the throne, the Malian Empire consisted of territories formerly belonging to Ghana Empire and Mali and immediate surrounding areas. And Musa held many titles: the Emir of Mali, the Lord of the Mines of the Wangara, the Conqueror of the Ghanata, and the Futa Jalon, and at least a couple more dozen. Now, according to Forbes magazine, the 14th century emperor of West Africa was worth a staggering $40 billion. So he is known, and this is like they say, adjusting to the inflation rate that was calculated. But to put this into perspective, if that's even possible, net worth calculations mean Mansa Musa's fortune far outstrips that of any current world richest man. So many people don't understand, he was the richest man ever in history. In the world. So, and Mansa Musa, as you see his picture, this was an African brother. He also went to, now this is alleged, but he also, looking for his brother. His brother had went away from Africa and he did not return. And so Mansa put a search team together to look for him. And so many say that he actually made it to America. And this would have been in the 1300s. So this would have been at least 100 so years before Christopher Columbus would have came. So not to mention one more thing about Mansa Musa. I mean, the man was so rich. They said that when he people talk about making it rain. People talk about he was making it like thunderstorm, he was like bricks of gold. He was leaving bricks of gold wherever he went. Being that he was a Muslim, he traveled to Mecca in his pilgrimage. And every year that he did that, it was the biggest event in that area. Because when he came through, he brought hundreds of caravans, everything. I mean, when he left the area, he left money. He left gold everywhere he went. So everybody was looking for this man at the pilgrimage time, okay? Go to the next one. Okay, we've got Hannibal. Hannibal ben Hannibal, or Hannibal actually should be Hannibal ben Hamilcar, but Hannibal being the son of Hamilcar Barca. Now this right here is a coin of that period of time, showing what Hannibal looked like. Okay. You see the elephant, and he's known, if anybody knows anything about Hannibal, he's known for his great feat of bringing elephants over the Alps. But he was a Punic or a Carthaginian military commander. Now, when I say the word Punic, I'm talking, the word Punic is the same as saying he's a Phoenician. So he was a Phoenician or Punic military commander that generally consisted of one of the greatest military commanders in history. Okay, I mean, we're on a people study him in military school. Okay, they study his what's the word? His strategies, the way he combat. They study this in schools to this day. His father, Hamilcar Barca, was the leading Carthaginian commander during the First Punic Wars. His younger brothers were Margo and Hasdrubal, and he was the brother-in-law of Hasdrubal the Fair. Now, Hannibal fought against the mighty Rome. Now, this is what he's known for. Hannibal is known because he fought against Rome and occupied much of Spain. He took Spain, this is the thing, he took elephants from Africa, okay, through Spain, through the Alps. Now, you know, we're talking about the Appalachian Mountains. We're talking about mountain ranges. He brought elephants through the mountains, okay, up into Europe. And he was within 20 miles of Rome. The Romans feared Hannibal so much that every day in the Senate, they would start their morning by saying, "Good morning, Romans. Carthage must be destroyed." Every morning they would say that. That was how fearful they were of Hannibal. They talked about, like we spoke of Spartacus, when you watch Roman literature shows or TV, they'll speak about Hannibal. Like they'll say, "Oh, the gods and Hannibal," or you know, Romans, even after he was defeated, still spoke about Hannibal in fear, or really kind of, I think they admired him in a lot of ways, you know. So he is a very important African figure. You can go to the next one. I'm not sure. When we think of Rome, when we think of emperors, we often think of Roman people being Europeans, and you know, we think of Caesar, you know, people like that. When we think of Rome, but this guy right here, where's my? This brother right here was one of the Roman emperors, and he was of African descent. Many don't know that. So, okay. His name was Septimius Severus. And he was from April of 145 to 145 AD. So he was born roughly 100 years or so after maybe of Jesus. He was a Roman emperor from 193 to 211. Okay, he was born in Leptis Magna, which is a province of Africa. So they're saying that he was an African. So after disposing and killing of the incumbent emperor, because you know how they were in Rome, you know, they would, if you wanted to step up, it wasn't like you elect, sometimes you don't elect an emperor. Sometimes you had to take it into your own hands. After the incumbent Didius Julianus, Severus fought his rival claimants and generals. Now this is another, Claudius Albinus, but Pessinus Niger. Now, you see the word Niger, and that is familiar with the word Niger River, or other words that we won't say, but the word Niger is signifying dark or black or African in that. So you had more than just Severus that was in Rome that was African. Okay. And it says that Niger was defeated in 194 at the Battle of Issus in Cilicia. Later that year, Severus waged a short punitive campaign beyond the eastern frontier, annexing one of the kingdoms as his new province. Severus defeated Albinus 3 years later at the battle in Gaul. Now, I just had to say this, I had to put him in here because nobody knew that Romans had African, that Barack Obama is the president of the United States today. He's one of so-called the first person of African descent to be president. But we don't understand that even before we had the great Roman Empire, that they had people that were like Barack Obama back then. Okay. All right. Go to the next one. I think this might be the last one. Now, this one is honorable mention because this one is this lady was after or around 1611 or 1619. So she's kind of right there at the cusp as we come into modern time slavery and where we come into modern Black History Month. But I wanted to put Queen Nzinga in here because she kind of is right there at the end of an old paradigm and bringing in a new paradigm. And what I mean by that is that before 1619, people of African descent still had a lot of control over the world. Like, many people don't realize that we have Moorish people who had taken and were controlling the water before 1619, before slavery, just before slavery, within 100 years or 100 or 200 years before this modern era of slavery, African people still were dominating the world. And so she's right here at the end of that phase. So she was born in 1583, and then she passed in 1663. She's a 17th century queen. She is known for her guerrilla tactics. Queen Nzinga fought off the Dutch and the Portuguese. She fought them off. She was the leader of these battles and was very successful at warding and keeping Dutch and Portuguese away from taking over. Okay, she was a brilliant strategist, and although past 60, led her warriors herself. So our sisters did these things. You know, we look at how sometimes we look at today and we don't realize that the African sisters were strong and were able to do the same things that the men were able to do, if not better. Never surrendering, she died in 1663, and it seemed like shortly after she died, that's when Portuguese was able to come in and do what they did. So I have to give praise to her. Is there any more clips? Yeah. I knew there was one more. My man. Now this is when I spoke about the Moors, I have to speak about them too, because Moorish people are African people who had adapted, or not adapted, but had converted to Islam in the early 7th, 8th centuries. They converted to Islam, but they were Africans. They were African, no doubt. But these Moors, under Tariq, in 711, he was a Moorish general. Tariq, who has been given the task of spreading the Moorish holding northward into the Iberian Peninsula. Now, Iberia, when they say Iberia, they're talking about Spain. That is Spain. The catalyst for this action was a request of the Greek governor to help in emancipation of the tyranny from the Visigoths. Now, what they're saying is that there was Greek, even at this time, Greek still existed, even though Greek had passed its time of being at its height. But at the time that Tariq was on the scene, Europe was in a dark age, meaning that there was chaos in Europe at this time. Okay, particularly in Spain, there was a lot of chaos. So they're requesting that the Moors come into Spain and help restore order in 711. Tariq and his black army swept into Spain and defeated the Visigoths. The Visigoths are a Germanic tribe. You have several Germanic tribes that after Rome fell, when Rome fell, that's when Europe went into a dark age. But Rome held the civilization together. When Rome fell, various Germanic tribes came in and were jockeying for power. So now you've got this void, if you will. And so now you've got different kingdoms coming in trying to take over, and civilization fell in that area. And so he comes in, beats the Visigoths, captures the Spanish towns, and takes over Toledo and Cordoba. So Spain, from 711 to 1491, that's 700 years that the Moors ruled Spain and brought civilization, science, philosophy, all these things back to Europe in that area. Okay, you can go to the next one. And so this takes me to the Moorish University in Spain. The Moorish University in Spain, many don't realize that when the Moors took over Spain, like we said, they brought this civilization, they brought science, they brought education back to that area. This was one of the first, there was only 2 universities back then. There was one in Spain, and there was one in Timbuktu. Okay, Timbuktu, which is in Africa. So we have, in 700 AD to about 14 something, there was no other real universities, you know. So many of the Europeans were able to access this Moorish University of Spain. And it was this university that brought what we call today as the Renaissance for Europe. The Renaissance being the rebirth, meaning rebirth, but they retained that knowledge because they went back and got it from here. There was a point in time when Europe, in the Dark Ages, because of the church and the lack of the Roman structure, they lost that information. That information was taken away from them, so they fall into this darkness. It was the university, the Moors, the Africans of North Africa, that brought this to them. Okay, so it's really important. Okay, so we can go to the next one. That's the same thing. Okay, so that can basically concludes the lecture. I just wanted to show people that there is an African, there's Black history that extends. We weren't just slaves. We've got movies like 12 Years as a Slave. These movies are great movies. I saw it was a great movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, go check it out. But for us to just see ourselves and depict ourselves coming out of slavery and having to pick ourselves up and as if that was all that we were, kind of takes away from Black history. And so I know that you guys are going to hear Black History Month, and like I said, we give praise to all of our ancestors that were here in America that fought for our freedom, who invented different inventions. There's no taking away from them. But we're going to hear that every day for the next 28, for these 28 days, that's what we hear. So my perspective was just to show that we are much more than 16, 19 enslaved. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.